Let's answer that what if question. What if we made it slightly different? What if we did it, a different way? And having perhaps the curiosity and a vision for what better might look like, and then try it.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. And today, my guest is Professor Mike Caine. Mike's someone that I've known for around about 15 years, and I've been very impressed with what he's been able to achieve, both as a leader within Loughborough University, one of the leading sports universities in the world, and also what he's been able to do at Progressive Sports and Technologies as an entrepreneur. We covered three pretty interesting subjects, and we went quite deep on each one of them. The first one was education, and I guess as a head of a university, it's something that Mike is very, well-rounded in. And we talked about the education sector, where it is today, where it's going, some of the challenges and issues in developing people and bringing people into an education system, and what some of the things that some of the new trends and movements that are happening in that space. The second thing we talked about is being an entrepreneur, and one of the things that Loughborough University has is a program where they basically develop entrepreneurs, and it's a subject that I'm very interested in, and I did my best to kind of dissect what's in that program, how they go about creating a program to teach people how to be an entrepreneur, some of the success traits that you would look for and that you teach people, and how they go about doing that. And I found that particularly fascinating. And then the third thing that Mike was very passionate about was basically leadership and creating a culture. Now, it's something that he's done both in business and also within a university, and he's been in a very fortunate position where he's been able to develop a world-class team, choosing some of the best people in the world to work on various projects that he's been involved in. So I really think this is a fantastic episode. I sort of could have gone on and spoke to Mike for several hours. It was extremely interesting, and regardless of where you are in your stage in business or your career, I think you'll find this an extremely interesting interview. So I hope you enjoy it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the conversation with Mike. You can contact us through our Instagram page or LinkedIn, and I really do hope that you enjoy this episode. So thanks for coming down. We've known each other for a long time, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
And I was just saying off camera, it's not until you do one of these that you realise how long you've known certain people, but how little you actually know about them. And I've sort of done a bit of research, and I found there's lots of things I know I've learnt about you, apart from you making or inventing the deck, or you and your team.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew.
So Mike, tell us a little bit about Mike Caine, or Dr. Mike Caine. Shall I call you that?
I wouldn't call me that. Mike's just great, Matthew. But I'm Professor Mike Caine. I'm Professor of Sports Technology and Innovation at Loughborough University. I've been at Loughborough 20 years. I studied there before that. So I'm a student at Loughborough. I left and then came back as an academic. And my background professionally has been at the intersection of innovation, entrepreneurship, sport, fitness, and feel privileged really to have worked with a lot of really good people on lots of exciting programs.
Yeah. How do you become a professor? Because have you got to be born with certain genetics to be able to do that? It's something that seems very outside of what I would have the ability to do. But how does that happen?
By serendipity in my case. I definitely, when I was studying through my GCSEs, O levels, A levels, I probably didn't know what a PhD was. I didn't know that you could become a doctor of a particular subject, and certainly I didn't know any professors. So it was a journey of discovery, but I was curious. I remember as a kid being, the kind of person who wanted to know why and how, and I was excited as I started to acquire knowledge that I was able to see a future that was beyond what I'd experienced sort of growing up. I grew up in Stoke, in a post-industrial area, in a mixed comp inner city sort of school environment. Not many people do, but that's quite a quite a limiting environment in terms of potential lifelong opportunity, and so education is a way to explore the possibilities beyond that immediate physical environment. And I realised that pretty early on, and I suppose because I was curious, I didn't find formal education too much of a hardship. I always played sport. That's the other thing that's worth saying. When times were tough at school or whatever, I always took solace in the camaraderie of sport. Team sport in particular, I really loved that sense of coming together and working on shared goals. And I think that sort of took me forward. So fast forwarding a little bit, I went to Loughborough to play rugby, candidly, and I pursued, having had a couple of full starts through my A-levels, so I thought I might go into engineering. I studied maths, physics, chemistry, struggled a little bit with some of the more technical aspects, and so I then picked up biology and really loved that. And so I thought, well, I've learnt my lesson, I'm going to pursue things I'm interested in academically. So I went to Loughborough, did a degree in human biology. I could have done sports science, but I intentionally went into human biology because, again, that curiosity dimension, it had elements of psychology, it had elements of the physiology, biomechanics, nutrition, human factors. So it was broader than just the kind of pure sports science. So although I was interested in sport, I liked the breadth of that degree, and I did really well, at Loughborough. I worked hard, played rugby for Loughborough, which was fantastic, met some great people, but I got a first class degree. Again, I wouldn't have known what that was beforehand, but appreciate that was.
What is that for?
So kind of top of the class,
Okay.
like top few percent of the class, and I got there because I was interested and I worked hard, and I thought I'm not going to regret fulfilling my potential. That I'm retrospectively thinking about this now, right? But that was pretty well. I'm confident that I was thinking like that at the time. Not that I knew where it would take me. Not that I got any great plan, but that felt right to me in the moment. So I was definitely, on it. I was ambitious. I was curious, and getting that top level degree opened the door to me. And that was that my academic supervisor at the time, Professor Alison McConnell, said, "Have you thought about a PhD?" No, tell me more, So PhD is a doctorate, a 3 to 4 year research endeavour. You have to do something novel, you have to contribute to the knowledge base in a fairly well-defined subject area. And Alison was at Loughborough at the time, but she was moving to University of Birmingham. And she said, "Why don't you come with me to Birmingham? They've offered you a scholarship." So I was going to get paid a small amount, but enough to live on, to study for another 3 or 4 years to get a PhD. I thought, brilliant. I'd loved Loughborough, but I felt like I'd done it. And Birmingham was a big city, another place, and had a great reputation, still does, for sports science. So I went to Birmingham, did a PhD in sports science. And while I was there, I think this is probably key, we'll pick this up, I'm sure, I started a company. And that's how I really got into entrepreneurship and innovation. I took what I was doing in the PhD, and with Alison and another colleague, Claire, we formed a company to take a product to market. And from that point on, I was hooked on, going from an idea to a product and all that goes with that.
Mm. It sounds like a lot to do at the same time. Do a doctorate, starting a company on its own, or doing the doctorate. What on earth got you to think about doing both at the same time?
It was a lot to do, and I remember being, physically really tired at the time. So I was, in the end, by the time I got my PhD, I was writing it in the evening, writing up, the thesis, the book that you produce at the end of the thing. I was doing that weekends and evenings. I was working very long days on the business as a director in this startup company. I'd met my future wife and we bought a house together. We were doing the house up. So life was very full on. I think the only thing that wasn't in the mix at that time was before we had kids, and that came a little bit later. But I was certainly busy. But I felt excited. That it felt to me at the time like we were getting somewhere, and that sense of progress and an idea of what we were trying to achieve felt clear. How we were going to get there felt very uncertain, but the idea that we were trying to do something that mattered to the people involved and could make a difference, on a good day to a wider group of people, perhaps even a wider population. So the product that we brought to market was a Class 1 medical device that helped people to improve their breathing.
Power Breathe.
This was Power Breathe. Thanks, Matthew. Going back a few years there, but and Power Breathe has gone on to be a global success, both commercially, but more importantly, at least to me, because I've not seen any financial upside to that. It's the people that it's helped. From chronic sufferers with emphysema and bronchitis and cystic fibrosis. Those kinds of severe respiratory conditions, right through to Olympic and elite athletes. And I fed off that. When you see, this was a team effort, of course, but a product that I'd helped fundamentally take from an idea to a physical entity and then promoted and manufactured and sold. When you see people using that and benefiting from it, that's quite infectious, and it sort of energizes you to try and, I think it certainly energized me to want to do more of that.
So one of the things that comes across is that ambition, I suppose at a relatively young age, to do things that generally require a lot of motivation. And you talk about vision and clarity about where you're going, and whatever was around you at the time seemed to support that. What's your thoughts in terms of, you must see hundreds of young people, some of them come into, go into university, and I suppose there's a lot that don't do that. I was one of those where I suppose school and learning at a younger age didn't inspire me, didn't motivate me. In fact, it kind of kicked me out. Yeah. What in your experience is required to, I suppose, get younger people on a good path? Is it something that happens with your family and your environment, which doesn't sound like you was in necessarily a great environment, or is this something that we people, parents can do to help bring that out of people to make some of those decisions that probably got you on the right track in your early days?
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. First of all, let me say my family environment growing up was incredibly supportive. I was well loved. And my parents were both interested in me. I've got a brother and sister in us. And so I felt empowered to go for it. And that, in my mind, that's a privileged upbringing. I know many kids and adults who didn't enjoy that level of support, but we were not a wealthy family, and we didn't have a tradition of going into higher education. So I was the first person in my family that got a degree, and then of course I kind of went on from there. But I think you'll appreciate, if you've got family support, that's a big plus in just about any way. That's likely to put you on the front foot. Whether you go into education or other activities doesn't really matter. I think in the absence of that, you need somebody normally. It might be an inspirational school teacher. It could be, a passionate coach. I think sport on a good day is a great conduit for social mobility. Just bringing kids into a pathway. Normally, if they're not engaging with the academics at school, at least sport can, in a formal sense, provide another way. And for me, that was always team sport. I enjoyed and had the privilege of being coached by a couple of inspirational people. People who are passionate, people who can see you've got a bit of potential and they're interested in helping you advance. And sport, if you're not academic, is a well-trodden path to creating a network of people that can help you on your way. Now, if you haven't got either of those things, I think it just gets tougher and tougher, doesn't it? Because in my experience, it's very difficult to achieve success in isolation. And if you are passionate and interested in something, it's probably through that that you're going to find like-minded people, and you need that little bit of luck just to connect with somebody who can point you in the right direction, pick you up when you fall, and perhaps provide you with that confidence to keep going when things get difficult. But certainly along my journey, I've been blessed to know several people at key points who I've thought of as mentors in an informal way. The kind of people who you trust, you like, you respect, and they've just got you thinking a little bit about, I can do this, or if I do it this way, maybe it'll be a brighter future.
You mentioned clarity, and again, speaking from my own perspective, and also quite a few people that I know, don't always have that clarity about what they should do and where they should go. And you also mentioned at the same time that you didn't really know where these decisions would lead you, but you seem to have a certain amount of clarity in the sort of short to medium term future. Yeah. Was that something then that the various people that you came into contact were able to give you that sort of short to medium term clarity of this is a kind of a vision that would help you follow?
Definitely, Matthew. I think as I'm retrospectively thinking about it, I was lucky to meet people who were willing to open a door, and I was sufficiently eager that I would at least think about going through those doors, right? So I got to the point where there were choices that I could make. And as I was maturing into adulthood, I'd realised that when I made choices that were reinforced by things that I enjoyed and was good at, it tended to be a positive experience. And so I was getting clearer and clearer about what I was not so good at, what I was not so interested in. And because I was driven by curiosity, I was sort of following almost my gut instinct and trusting people because you got that, I can see that I can respect your opinion. And that's pretty well the way it went. That got me back to Loughborough. I saw a job advert for an academic role. It's a junior lectureship role, so the entry level into academia for a sports technologist. And I didn't think of myself as a sports technologist at that time, but I read the job description and it said something like, this is the intersection between design, engineering, manufacturing, and sports science and human biology, biomechanics. Ooh, okay. So some of this I can tick the boxes on, and the other bits that I can't, I'm definitely interested in. So one thing follows another, and I applied for the job and I got it, and that was a big leap of faith again. The guy who opened that door for me was Professor Roy Jones, now retired, but a very very charismatic, passionate man, and he was like, "You're going to be great. Like just get on and come in and make it happen. Give it a go." And so all the things that I knew I didn't know, he wasn't bothered about. He was like, "You're going to be working in a team. We're falling over engineers here. We don't need any more engineers. You come in," and what that enabled me to do was build teams. So I got the privileged position where I could work with world-class people who were expert in production techniques or user-centric design or materials in an environment that was full of top-end laboratory equipment and so on. So I was really excited at that point, to have the opportunity to become a sports technology academic, working with people with complementary skills. Was really the foundation for then, the majority of my subsequent career. That's where that felt like the foundational element was then in place for me to go on and do, what I've done in the last 20 years.
This is a kind of a double question, but my guess is with a university, you take people on a journey, and at different parts of that journey, there's different decisions to make. Again, I've not been through this, so I'm only sort of speaking from what I know. But it is one of the things that you try and help people with is to follow either what makes sort of logical business sense, and we talked about this sort of setting up entrepreneurs earlier on, or do you encourage people to say, well, look, what are you passionate about, and get them to follow a passion regardless of some of the consequences? How does that work?
Oh, well, that's a really interesting question, and I don't think there's one single way. But what I'm comfortable asserting is that you need a framework. Ross and I'll introduce Ross properly in a minute, but Ross is my business partner at Progressive Sports, and we founded Progressive shortly after I came back to Loughborough as an academic. But Ross and I often talk about you need technical competence. Like that might not be a fun thing to acquire. It might not be something that on a daily basis excites you or fills you with a fulfillment of your passion, but it's an enabling step. So often I think about acquiring competence, and then from competence, mastery. Right. And if you're pursuing that, it enables things that then you can choose to focus it on. And that might be your passion for fitness or sport, or creating the world's best fitness equipment. But you can't do that just because you're interested in it. You can't do it just because you want to. You have to have the foundational elements. And that'll resonate with you, I'm sure, because you hire people and retain people because they've got that talent. And when you put all of that together and people contribute that expertise, you're able to realise the ambition of creating fantastic product, in your case, fitness equipment. So that's what you're trying to get people to see on a degree programme.
And what is, when you say competence, just so I fully understand, what do you mean by that then?
I mean, know-how, the understanding of the consequences of the choices you're making. Whether that's in how to create a 3D CAD model, computer-aided design model of a part. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the difference between a good CAD model and a poor CAD model, and that's about technical expertise. Understanding the stresses and the strains, understanding how it's going to be manufactured, the consequences of the geometry, the shape of the part. If you don't have the discipline to acquire that knowledge, you're not going to have the competence to pursue mastery. You might know enough to be dangerous, but you're not going to know enough to be able to make consistently sound decisions. And you could apply that to sports science, to nutrition, to strength and conditioning. If you're not prepared to read the evidence and acquire the knowledge, then you'll just keep doing what a small group of people have always done, and that's lazy, right? That's the easy track. Whereas I'm saying to people, you've got 3-4 years to invest in yourself. In a place where most of the people around you in this learning environment is an opportunity to absorb knowledge and apply that in a safe environment where you can make mistakes and learn from them, and leave that journey, with a degree, let's say, and have a level of competence. Now, hopefully, along the way, you meet people who challenge your view on the world. They've come from different backgrounds. They've seen different things. Maybe a tutor will say, have you thought about a work experience placement? There's somebody I know who I think would give you, take you on, give you a break. And all of a sudden you're going, okay, I can do that, I can see that. And I can see how if I apply my expertise in this area, I can make it coincide with what I'm interested in. And then that's where the magic happens, right? Where you've got something of value and you're able to dial it into an area that personally excites you. If you get that right, you're going to be happy, and if you're lucky, you might have some commercial success, depending on the choices that you make.
Yeah. So one of the things you spoke about earlier is building teams, and I'll get you to explain your sort of recent venture of taking Loughborough University to a campus in London. Yeah. And from all accounts, you had the opportunity to build, I suppose, choose some of the best people in the world to do that. So maybe you could explain that journey first, just to give some context. And then secondly, what do you look for when trying to find some of the best people in the world in terms of sort of habits, and what are some of those common habits that the best people in the world have or have built up?
Absolutely. Well, I'm smiling because it's probably become one of my favourite subjects. The recognition, and I'm sure this will resonate with both yourself and people listening is it's all about people. You know, at the end of the day, almost everything we do in our professional and personal lives is about the connections we make and the transactions we enjoy with people, right? So that truism is a bit of a platitude, but that's my starting premise. My first experience, having come back to Loughborough, of creating a team was with Progressive Sports. So I'll just say a little bit about that. You know, so I had the good fortune to meet Ross Weir. Ross and I founded Progressive Sports in 2001, and I think, you know, we got a complementary fit. So the first thing is, if you're starting a business, the data says that there's some advantage in not going it alone. Now, there's pros and cons, and I'm not saying, oh, you've got to have a team right from the start. I'm not prescriptive about these things, but in my experience, what resonated for me is doing something with a like-minded person with complementary skills and interests feels like you can build momentum more quickly, and certainly I find it personally more fulfilling. You know, doing things on your own, you've got full control, and you thrive or fail based on your own endeavour, and there's something, you know, about that I understand, but it's nowhere near as interesting or as fun as trying to do something with someone else or a small group of people. And most great things, in my experience, start with a small group of people, not a large group, right? And they grow from there. But Progressive Sports was probably the first experience I had with Ross of thinking about how we pick people, you know, employ people, and you take on that burden, don't you, we want someone great to join us, but we're then responsible. You know, that's an interesting, almost binary step when you start a business. That first employee and first employees, and now we need them to work for us, but we need to build a business that can sustain them financially and give them growth and opportunities to fulfill their own potential. So that I learnt a lot from working with Ross and growing Progressive Sports. Our ambition at that time was to innovate fitness equipment, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but that's what we wanted to do: take ideas, develop them with a team of people, small group of people who shared that vision, and that's endured. You know, that's evolved and endured. But in parallel to that, again, I had the good fortune of securing a multi-million-pound grant to create the Sports Technology Institute at Loughborough University. Roy Jones had built a research group that was, you know, achieving eminence, and it had got a critical mass of very capable people, but the laboratory facilities were suboptimal at that time, and that was recognised, and we as a team, we got a big grant, you know, £5.5 million towards creating what became a £15 million Sports Technology Institute, and I led that process, the strategy around that. And then, to your point, the team. You know, I definitely got a lot wrong in how that was rolled forward. And you know, my reflection is that I didn't effectively take everybody that mattered with me on that particular journey. And it was very fast-paced. It was very demanding. I definitely was really clear in my mind about, we're going to do it like this. It needs to be done like that. And I got down the line and we created something, but I felt like it was disproportionately done in a way that, you know, I determined, rather than it being about a consensus. And I, you know, I thought I won't do it like that again.
How would you have done it then, would you say?
Well, I was blessed. So I got the opportunity not too long after to set up Loughborough University in London. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The Loughborough was getting invited to contribute to the conversation about how should we as a nation leverage the London 2012 Olympic Games for a lasting legacy. And I thought, that's interesting. You know, that's and as a professor, by then I was a professor, so Professor of Sports Technology and Innovation, getting invited to London, you know, typically, to talk to like-minded people, policymakers, politicians and so on, about what do we mean when we talk about legacy, how might we make London 2012 Olympics and Paralympic Games a lasting success story for the country. And where I was coming from was, well, you've got to have something to do with education. We need to have an economic and social impact. These were the things I was interested in. So I kept turning up. Loughborough kept being invited to these meetings, and in the end, I was the one person who kept turning up. In a busy day job, I'd get down to London and enjoy these conversations, and it became clear to me that with the right proposal, there was the political will for Loughborough to have a physical presence on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. I thought, well, that'd be nice. That would be something, because we've got this world-leading, university for sport and engineering, innovation, but can we replicate some of that? The best of that, not copy it, but take the essence of it and put it on the Olympic Park and do something special. And these things they're complex and they're long, but the short of it is I persuaded enough people and was supported sufficiently by Loughborough University to take that step, and and that's what we've done. So having led the team to create the Sports Technology Institute, and having worked with Ross to set up and start growing progressive sports, I then got the opportunity to create Loughborough University London, and that and put into practice a lot of the things that by then I felt I'd learned about leadership, culture, vision, hiring people. Go on.
I was just listening. No, failure. Prior to camera, you said you're kind of an entrepreneur, but you're not, and you're not someone that takes big risks and talks about makes lots of mistakes. But it kind of sounded like if you take what you've done at Loughborough for a moment, it sounds like you kind of felt as though you'd learned initially in your role at Loughborough, and you'd made a few mistakes in terms of how you set things, and you'd obviously recognise those and develop them in the next venture. Would that be correct? And if so, how do you look at failure? Is it something that you just try to avoid? Is it something you embrace? Is it important in becoming a better version of yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm absolutely comfortable asserting that I've had many failures. I mean, some people that you interact with just try and hide that, and I'm very open about it. I am flawed, obviously, and you have to recognise, in my opinion, you have to recognise your strengths and your weaknesses. You have to work on your weaknesses and celebrate and grow your strengths, right? So that's my basic philosophy. If you're pushing the envelope of what's possible and you're prepared to challenge yourself, you're going to make mistakes. I don't try and fail. I'm not a kind of fail fast, it's fine. Let's just do it. And I don't like that approach. I think I'm perhaps too thoughtful to just be as spontaneous as that. I think in business and in other aspects of your life, thinking forward about the consequences of the choices, and then trying to minimise the risks and promote the opportunity for the upside of whatever you're trying to do. That's certainly been my approach, right? Rather than just it feel like a random process or a random journey. But inevitably, because life is uncertain, and because if you're trying to do things that are difficult and have not been done before, things won't always work out, you're going to fail. And I think, for me, it's then you accept that and you learn from it. And I reflect on things, so I'll think, all right, not dwell on it, not get too down about it, but I'll think about why it didn't work out how I hoped or thought. And then often you'll settle on something, or you'll persuade yourself that you understand it a little bit better, and maybe you make a determination to do something a little bit differently. And this is just I'm talking about experience, aren't I? This is, you get to nearly 50, and what you're able to bring into anything I'm now doing, it's that sense of I've seen that before. One of my colleagues uses a phrase. He says, "I've been to that dance before." I think I know what that means. It's like I've seen the pattern. I've seen the banana skin. I've seen how that bear trap over there can be avoided if we just walk around it this way. And so you get a repertoire of perhaps skills or behaviours or just things that you can do when you spot a particular risk or you're on the precipice of something going wrong, and that's just experience. And because I'm thoughtful, I tend to be thinking about those things in a fairly considered way. So when it came to Loughborough University, London, I was really clear. Perhaps too clear in a way, but I knew exactly what I wanted to try and achieve, and I knew exactly the type of person that I needed around me to fulfil that ambition.
Do you use some of those, whether you call it failures or lessons, to propel you to take other opportunities to kind of put those right? I know for me sometimes if I do it wrong, it's like I'm looking for an opportunity to now, like, right, okay, I've done it wrong, I've figured it out, and now I want to do it. Do you do that, or do you use a different thing to drive emotion?
Well, you feel fortunate when you get the opportunity to put things right. So I totally understand that psychological kind of construct of I've made a mistake, or I haven't done it as well as I would like, but I know why, or I think I know why. And then when the opportunity arises and you can say, now I can put into action, kind of almost the gratification of doing it and seeing it work. It is tempting to seek that out, and sometimes I'm sure I do, but other times it just sits maybe at the back of your mind, or it's sort of in your back pocket, and then you smile to yourself when you think, okay, it's been a while, but I can put something into play. And normally for me, I'm in a people business. It's about an interaction. It's about seeing a conflict or seeing some incongruence between the way I'm thinking and the way someone else is thinking, and being able to say, I can see that if I don't just intervene here, maybe reconceptualize the way I'm interacting with somebody to help them restructure the way they're thinking about me and the way they're therefore thinking about what we're trying to do together. If I don't do that, we're heading in a direction I don't want us to head in. Now I'm hearing myself say that, it sounds quite manipulative, and maybe it is, but it's certainly done with the intention to seek a harmony, to avoid a conflict, to align people around something positive and constructive for their benefit, for my benefit, and for the wider impact of the institution or the organisation or ultimately society. So that's what I'm trying to do, is take those experiences and say, I've seen that risk. Can I intervene? Can I interject? Can I take a different approach? Can I be a different version of me for that person? So I'm as I've matured, I try to do the accommodating. Not that I blow in the wind on things, and not that I won't say no, or that I won't be clear about that decision's been made, but that I'm very open to taking a different tack based upon what works for somebody else, rather than me expecting them to bend and accommodate to me. And I think there's something in there about leadership. I don't think that's a particular type of leadership, but when I'm thinking about and talking about leadership, I'm thinking about how you can get the best out of other people by changing the way you are in a sincere and authentic way, to get that sense of collective endeavour.
I guess it has to start with us personally, and I guess whether you call it failure or lessons that you learned from your first position has enabled something to happen, and for also to provide opportunities for a lot of other people because of that and what you're then able to do from there. When you're working with people, teaching them about being an entrepreneur, for example, that we chatted about, and taking risks. I suppose, and risk is an interesting word, but you certainly have pushed yourself to do things. You know, you've pushed yourself outside of, you call it comfort zone, where there's a good chance that you are going to make some mistakes, and then that's propelled you somewhere else.
Yes.
What's your view on risk? How would you teach that to people? Because I suppose if you just stayed within your comfort area, you would never get those lessons. You would never have gone on to do other things. How do you teach that to other people?
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's a personal construct. You know, how we perceive risk as individuals varies, right? And it's relative. You know, for somebody who is really secure, whether that's financially or in other ways, you know, risk, the consequences of failure are very different for different people at different times. I've been blessed to spend a lot of time with young people, right? And being an older person increasingly around younger adults gives you the privilege of you know, a platform to share that experience. And so I'll often say it's a great time to take risk. You know, before you have much to lose, right? Before the consequences of your failure are going to impact on lots of other people. So it's easily said, and it's not easily done, because, you know, the young adult who's perhaps not yet got their first pay packet, you know, or is on a student loan to pay their rent, you know, they don't feel like they've got nothing to lose, right? They think, well, I've got everything to lose, but it's relative, and certainly if you can get people excited about the upside of the opportunity, and they think about risk as an unfulfilled opportunity, and then you give people the tools and the support structures to cover off some of the downside. So you go, okay, the risk is there's an uncertain outcome, but the uncertain outcome has a positive upside and it has a potential negative downside. If you can do all the things in your control to reasonably control the impact of the downside, and then work really hard to pursue the upside, you're probably not going to regret that. And that's where I come down to this sense of, it's not cavalier. It's not a gung-ho, I'm just going to roll the dice and hope it comes up 6, 6, 6, you know, or black or red. It's like, no. This is a process that requires strategy and thought and planning. It requires dedication. It requires discipline. It requires you to make consistently good choices, sound judgments, probably with some technical competence to underpin those decisions, probably with, you know, a good set of people around you, people that are energizing, not energy sapping, people that can contribute rather than just, you know, take. And if you put those things in place, you'll recognise you're loading the dice, right? You're tipping the odds. You're going to be unlucky if things don't go well, and certainly if you keep doing the right things, you're going to enjoy a level of success eventually. And it's just in that sense having the, you know, building the character and the resilience to persevere. Right. And that's about, you know, that's not an educational process per se. It's how do we support that journey from childhood into adulthood, where you expose people to the opportunities to make mistakes, fail, learn, bounce back, and support them to not be defeated by that experience, but strengthened by that experience. And that doesn't have to happen in a university. It just so happens that, you know, that's an environment I'm familiar with, and that's you know, an environment that does lend itself to that if it's done well. And sport and fitness, you know, there are other communities, aren't there? There are communities where you can safely transition, you know, from naive to experienced by interacting purposefully with people who've got different and more diverse experiences than you have. And that yeah, there's a theme there, why I'm attracted to sport and teams and culture. You know, there's a sweet spot in the middle of all that, I'm sure. And
at the moment, you mentioned about having specific programs for
Yes.
young entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we teach master's degrees in innovation management and entrepreneurship and a raft of other titles that are similar to that. And that's a conscious choice, right? When we were setting up the campus in London, we were thinking about what does society and the economy need, and what do young people of today around the world want, and what will be valuable to them. And certainly, you know, the track of entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, and I'm not suggesting it's a panacea. But for those young people that are curious and have got that sense of, I wonder if I could do it, then having a formal education that teaches the science and the evidence, whilst having an extracurricular activity that supports them to try with people that are mentors, that have set up businesses, that have had successes and failures, and can bring like-minded people together so that you've got a community. You can share ideas around best practice. You can go and see and talk to people at a similar stage, or one or two stages ahead of where you are as a student, and see that roadmap and journey. I'm certain, based on the feedback that we get, that is helpful for some people. The idea of the lone wolf entrepreneur who just goes to the mountain and makes it all happen, that can happen, I'm certain. And it's not always young people that for whom that works. But again, I come back to my values and what I've experienced. If you can share it, if you can talk about it, if you can do it in parallel to other people at the same time, you can feed off that, and it tends to sustain and nurture. And that's what we're doing. For young entrepreneurs, that's what we're trying to put in place. And it's too early to say how successful that's been, but certainly I'm guessing now that a few hundred young people from around the world have experienced that and are starting to take that forward with them as they go off into the wider world.
It's interesting. I just wonder how you go about building a program for an entrepreneur, because it's in this world it seems to be changing, and the sort of lead on from that is, have you found any common traits that seem to be relatively universal, that things that you get these people to focus on that would lead to a certain element of success, even though there's never any guarantee in business?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I want to convey that there's not just one way, right? And I'm not evangelical about this is the way you should do it. So for me, it's more about creating an environment where you're positively reinforcing people to explore what is possible for them. And then you create an environment where they can have regular contact with people with different experiences and different skills. Let's call them tutors, either academics or members of staff who can say, you can go to for advice because they've got expertise. They've seen it, they've done it, or they've read the evidence base. And when you do that, you're allowing people to make thoughtful, considered decisions, and you can put in place structures. So, in a simple way, let's think about it as business basics. For a young 18, 19-year-old who has no family background of, let's say, of starting a business, you can say there are some logical steps. There are some, what to an experienced business founder and entrepreneur would be perhaps obvious things, are not obvious to somebody who's never done it before. So just simply putting that framework of, this is how you do the fundamentals. This is what a business plan looks like. This is how you gather market intelligence. These are experts in, Bill Owlett, a friend of mine who's at MIT, runs the Center for Entrepreneurship at MIT, and he's wrote a book on disciplined entrepreneurship. And I like that. There's a process you can go through. You start at number 1 and you end up at number 20, and you're in business, right? And going through that and saying, okay, have you read that book? Read the book. There's a roadmap. You don't have. It's not that you can't deviate. It's not that it's the only way, but we can reduce the odds of you making fundamental mistakes by you focusing on a structure that is going to guide you in the right direction. And so that's what that's what I'm trying to create. And then you put some of the softer skills around that. You want to be inspired, right? You want to feel empowered. And that comes from energizing people. So I don't think I fully answered an earlier question, but what am I looking for when I'm building a team? People you can feed off, who share the same set of values, who are going to model preferred behaviors, who are going to be comfortable contributing their own ideas towards a shared sense of a positive future, right? And that's all a bit fluffy, but it comes down to you're looking for people who are excited about excellence, and you're looking for people who are prepared to share it for the benefit of everybody, rather than just, this could be good for me. It needs to be good for everybody. And you know yourself, although these things are difficult to describe, they're not that difficult to see and sense and feel. You get to know somebody a little bit, and you're starting to get a sense of what they're like, and you talk to other people and you see what they've done before and how they handle themselves. And all of a sudden, you see their eyes light up when you talk about, we could do this together. This could be your role, your special contribution. And if at that point they're getting excited, you can be pretty sure that they're going to want to share and be willing to give, not only to the student body, but to the staff and the academics around them, the wider community, if you like. And that's powerful. So when I'm recruiting, I led the process of recruiting about 75 people in about 3.5 years. And all the academic appointments we made about 50, 55 appointments, were global searches. So you're looking for the very best people in the world with their technical competence, their mastery, but their fit. They have to be excited about the vision and the mission. And I travel globally to meet people I thought might have that. And then you hang out with them in their environment, and you're making an assessment of, you're trying to fast forward to, will they fit culturally? You're looking for diverse people, diverse skills, diverse interests, but will the environment you're creating and the vision you're pursuing as a leader be something that will excite them, so that they can contribute and lead and challenge and energize others around them? And if you get that right, and I think, I'm proud of what we've done in London, the student body benefits from that. Coming back to the would-be entrepreneur and students not doing entrepreneurship, they benefit from that. But as importantly, that energy feeds off each other. So the academics and the support team and the professional services staff, that community, that organisation, feeds off that collective energy in a way that's sort of a positive reinforcement loop. I think in any organisation, when things are going really well, you'll feel that, and when they're not going so well, it's probably because one or two key people are not, contributing in the way you need them to contribute, and then it doesn't take much before it can start to, you can start to lose it, and you're really on the back foot then.
I'm going to try and sort of put this question together, because some ideas are going through my mind as you say that. One of the things I guess you see with traditional education process and systems is there's a kind of a fairly structured way of coming in, and things that you have to do and boxes that you have to tick. And previously we were talking about how the internet's affected education. So you can get someone from a rural part of India, for example, that would never ever be able to go to a university like Harvard, for example, and now they can jump on a program and get involved. Do you think that for people to be successful in various different areas of life or study, do you think that there has to be a certain level of inbuilt natural intelligence, or do you think it's trying to be very broad and understand people's passion at the right time, and then kind of, you know, develop those skills so that they can probably be something that they never would have been able to do if that structure around them hadn't supported that? And I suppose I suppose, you know, does the system itself, you know, or has the system itself sometimes prevented getting those people that could be a great asset to the team just because they're probably not fitted into a certain box that has been created over time?
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure in that point you're making that you're right. You know, so when you think about higher education or even formal education more broadly, it's flawed. You know, its basic premise is that at a predetermined age, you're going to have an intellectual or, you know, development that's equal to your cohort, your peer group, and that you're going to be stage gated to demonstrate your ability by passing some sort of formal exam. I mean, when it's ludicrous, really. I mean, it's such a limited, preconceived idea. It's almost a kind of mass form of efficiently processing, you know, people, isn't it? So I'm laughing because it's absurd, and I think as an educationalist, it pays to sort of be reminded by, you know, of the limitations that creates. Now, I don't want to come across as an apologist for university, because I'm intensely proud of what a university education and the kind of wider environment can be a life-changing experience for young adults, typically for young adults, you know, somewhere like Loughborough. But your point is so well made that it's exclusive. It's by definition unattainable or inappropriate for that artificial track to be the default way in which people access knowledge and education. And of course it's changing, and I'm trying to drive some of that change. You know, I want to democratize the access to knowledge. The internet's you know, even in some of the more remote parts of the world, and the example of rural India and so on, it is absolutely germane. Those communities now are able to access a level of connectivity where they can self-educate, follow, you know, their curiosity, and at their own pace, in their own way, irrespective of what age they might be, or irrespective of what other formal education or lack of education they're receiving. If the content is appropriate and it's communicated well, it's there in a way that hasn't been the case, certainly, you know, in decades past. And you know, I'm really grateful for some of the world's best universities, supported by some very generous philanthropists, are now putting out, you know, content as a gift to the world, really. You know, open access, free to download course content from some of the finest minds on the planet. It is now achievable and it's being realised. And when it's done well, of course, what you're able to follow it up. You don't just push it out there and forget about it. You monitor who's accessing it, and you assess it online, and you can say, oh, look at that. You know, there's somebody with a profile we understand, either from what they've shared with us or from the digital footprint that it's leaving. And we know that we can make some assumptions about their circumstances, and we can see that they are absolutely exceptional in the context of where they currently find themselves. Let's interact with them. You know, and in reality, Matt, that means let's invite them into our community. You know, let's reach out to them and say, come into, you know, our environment and see if it fits for you. And often that means you've got to fund everything. You've got to literally arrange to pick that person up and bring them for a week or whatever it might be, and then support them to adjust to that. and allow them to make informed choices about how they can access that educational support structure in whatever way works for them. And that this is a journey that the best universities in the world are just starting, really. I mean, there's a lot happened in a short period of time, but the potential for that is enormous.
And what's the you mentioned a website or something what was the name of that where they're putting out this information? Is it?
Yeah, well, there are several now, but for anybody that's interested, a quick search of the internet around virtual learning environments or open course or MOOCs, massive online open courses, anything like that, or if you type in certainly Harvard, MIT, they've got an enormous, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars creating and putting that kind of content out there. The Open University in the UK is doing some good stuff as well, and increasingly, you'll see your local university wanting to make available at least some of its content to as wide an audience as possible. So it's definitely building momentum, and I think the potential for that to enable lifelong learning, enable people to self-select how and when they access education in order to reskill. I talked earlier about competence and mastery and striving for excellence. We're living in times that are fast-paced, aren't they? We're talking about, you'll be talking in your business about, the role of automation, the role of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and how do you access that? So the kind of skill sets that we needed 5 and 10 years ago won't be the skill sets we needed 5 or 10 years time, and yet we're living longer. We're going to need to work longer. For most people, working longer is good for them in a way, as long as it's the right sort of stuff. So the universities have to play a role in sharing content and access to the community, so that we can support people to take kind of micro chunks of educational content and provide it to them when they need it, rather than saying, you've got to spend 3 or 4 years on a university campus. I don't think that model's dead. Coming together as a community is a special thing, but it's not a panacea, and it can't be and won't be the only model in the future.
And it leads me on to innovation, which was kind of central to what I wanted to talk about. And I know we're coming to the end of our time, but what's part does innovation play? I guess in business, I suppose it's fairly obvious, maybe, but what part does innovation play as an individual entrepreneur, as an individual leading a university, I suppose in all parts of life and business? How is it important, and what are some of the things? How do you deal with it? Because there's also, again, a lot of risk. There's a lot of, depending on the type of person, you can end up going all over the place and not focus on what you need to do. Let's talk about innovation for a moment.
Well, for me, innovation's it's a multifaceted dimension, as you rightly say. But at one end, and I think in the most generic sense, it's about change management, right? It's about being willing to do something differently in pursuit of a better outcome, a better process, a more efficient way of achieving the same output, a way of creating a product that's less expensive to manufacture, a way of creating a product that's more sustainable, more environmentally sustainable. Whatever lens you're looking through, to my mind, in its simplest, it's a process of managed change with a strategic intent. I think, and that's a very, it's probably not a dictionary definition of innovation, but it's a sort of working construct for me. And then, the innovation that we're more familiar with in our business relationship, as it were, is about how can we make a better product? How can we enhance an experience for a gym goer or somebody who's doing a workout, so that they can fulfill their own workout ambitions more effectively than they would otherwise have been able to do. And that can be, and often is, incremental, a slightly better more ergonomic grip on a dumbbell, or a slightly more well thought out range of movement, or a specification of a material that minimizes impact, or an intuitive design that allows you to reconfigure a piece of equipment more efficiently, and what that boils down to is user insight. Ross and I and the team at Progressive Sports, we're putting that front and center. I'm thinking about who's using Escape's equipment, and are they maximally fulfilled as a result of that experience? So how do we as a design and innovation team say, okay, Escape make brilliant product and their users love that experience, but is there room for any improvement? What's the next generation that's going to of equipment that's going to delight that consumer and have commercial value as a consequence? And I know you work really hard to do that, and we've enjoyed working with you over the years in pursuit of that goal. And that's about understanding that user, right? It's about observing what they do. It's about listening to what they say. It's about empathizing with that experience. Typically that, for Ross and me, that'll be, well, let's try it. Let's do it ourselves. And let's try other things that are similar but different. And let's answer that what if question. What if we made it slightly different? What if we did it a different way? And having perhaps the curiosity and a vision for what better might look like, and then try it. And so we in that product innovation space, it's often about, let's start with the user, let's understand the state of the art, let's understand and empathize with the current experience, but then let's imagine what better might look like, and let's try it. Let's simulate it, let's prototype it. I love working with Ross because he will develop a prototype in an hour, and it'll be whatever he's got on his desk at home, and that's often what it takes. Let's just start the process of imagining and then bringing to life the possibilities for doing something differently in order to make it better. And of course, once you get something, you can pick it up, you can feel it, you can look at it, you go, oh, we didn't see that challenge, or oh yeah, that definitely will work. And you take the next step, and the next step is an iterative one of, well, we'll refine it, we'll make a scale model, or we'll make a computer model, or we'll run the idea past a focus group. And you kind of go through these stages. Sometimes they're formal, sometimes they're informal, sometimes you can do it very quickly, sometimes it's a long process. But what you're essentially doing is taking insights, feedback, test, validate, tweak, improve. And what when you get it right, and we don't always get it right, but when you get it right, what comes out at the other end is better than what you started with. And then when we do it, we celebrate it as innovation. We say we've innovated something, we talk about it as innovation. And we live in a world where increasingly people prize it. People, and I feel great about that. And I think we should prize the innovators. We should celebrate not just the people who derive the commercial success, the entrepreneurs, but the people who invent, the people that create, the scientists, the engineers, the artisans. Let's showcase what they can do, because when you harness that endeavour, you're able to make the world a slightly better place. Whether that's for a fitness community, or whether that's for wider society. And I hopefully you can tell I get excited about that opportunity.
Do you think that's a mindset that you need to develop into your culture about exploring and trying to do things better? And then secondly, how can you be careful of how far ahead you can innovate? Because I know as an example, the deck, we worked together on that for probably about 7 years before anyone even believed it was a great idea. As obvious as it seemed, nobody brought the thing, and then suddenly the stars aligned, and bang, it was a massive success. So one, about the culture, and two, how do you kind of get that balance between being too far ahead of the curve?
Absolutely. I mean, the phrase disruptive innovation has become, quite pervasive now. And what people really mean when they talk about disruptive innovation is a paradigm shift. You're going to completely flip the way a particular industry works. So going from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle, that's a paradigm shift. It's a disruptive innovation. And obviously, I say obviously, it's apparent. We know history teaches us that with those kind of paradigm shifts, timing is important. Like, timing is almost everything. And you'll hear people say, oh, they were ahead of their time. They were a pioneer, and they'll often, those ideas will eventually. So it's what I think you're referencing, Matthew, is you've got to have your finger on the pulse as to, in a commercial sense, when is the consumer ready for what we're thinking will be better for them? At the end of the day, rightly so, consumers determine which innovations are successful. They can be helped by good marketing, by people who are professionally able, as you did very successfully, to communicate the value and the benefit and have the persistence to keep talking about it and showcasing it. The deck is becoming, for those who don't know, the deck's a reconfigurable exercise platform. You can step on it, sit on it, stand on it. It's very, very versatile. But its adoption was slow, but it's becoming almost a design classic, isn't it? Because it's now perversely got a sense of longevity. It can be adapted to do different things, and that's what, bringing it back to how do you de-risk innovation, or how do you try and innovate so that it matches an unmet market need? Ross and I are often thinking about, will it endure? Will it rather than chasing the fashion and the fad of today and maybe enjoying some instant success, which is tempting commercially, yeah. and sometimes we all get pulled into that because we have to pay the mortgage. But when we're really at our best, we're thinking about, will it add value today, tomorrow, and the next day? And if you fast forward in a number of years, and when you get that right, the beauty is that it doesn't have to be immediately successful, but you're giving a product every prospect of eventually achieving success and then sustaining success. And as we think about protecting the environment and being more sustainable, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, certainly in the fitness industry, to try and avoid that immediate fashion and fad, and think about long-term value for the consumer, making high-quality products that are versatile and durable and will have value in the years to come. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, look, I know we've got to wrap up. Two quick questions before we finish. Yeah. First one is, if people are interested in finding out about, I guess, both Loughborough University and the programs you've got there, and then also Progressive, where can people go to find out more about you and some of the great things that you're involved with?
Oh, thank you for that. I mean, Loughborough University is pretty straightforward. I mean, we're currently world ranked #1 for sport-related subjects. So, in a nutshell, it's not difficult to find more about Loughborough. Just put it into your search engine, and you'll get to where you want to get to. Progressive is much more carefully hidden away. As a company, we don't have the visibility and the presence of Loughborough, but as a Loughborough spin-out company based on the Loughborough Science and Enterprise Park, if you look, you will find us. Progressive Sports Technologies, progressivesports.co.uk is the website. Please check us out. We're a small team. Ross and I and the rest of the team at Progressive are always happy to take unsolicited inquiries, love picking up the phone and speaking to people. So if you've heard me on the podcast and you want to get in touch, don't hesitate. Look us up online and then pick up the phone.
Fantastic. And then final question, Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be, I suppose, one of your memorable examples of escaping your own personal limits?
Wow. Well, you touched upon it earlier. I think it's a bit of a cop-out in a way, but I still look back at the day that I became a professor. It is an absolute privilege that's bestowed on a relatively small number of people, and it's about peer acceptance. As an academic, it's your peers that determine whether you should have the ultimate accolade of the title of professor, and that's at the point where they feel you've got that a level of competence that's approaching mastery. And so when when people you respect make that judgment and it's bestowed upon you, I think I could have never, growing up in Stoke, playing sport and trying to get my head down in school, I've imagined that I would be a professor of sports technology and innovation at the world's #1 sports university. So it's a little bit of a cop-out, Matthew. I'm not going to expose myself more than that. But let's leave it on that note.
Okay. Well, Mike, thank you for your time. As always, we could have gone on for probably another hour, but I know time doesn't allow us that today. But maybe we can get you back in again and talk a bit more on innovation. But thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you,
All
Matthew.
right, and best of luck in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Cheers.